Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is an executive spiritual coach for Franz Barton, and he is the author of the books Panic Magic and Preparation for Great Light. His name is Clint Sabom, and my interview with Clint will follow the note-taking sounds. Clint Sabom, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
You are an executive spiritual coach for Franz Barton. What is your work as an executive spiritual coach like?
Oh, it's good. Franz Barton created a step-by-step process of acquiring magical abilities in initiation into hermetics. And I coach clients. That book, Initiation into Hermetics, has become popular in recent years, especially with younger generations. And so there's a lot of demand for that. I also sell online classes, and of course, I've written a new book, Panic Magic, and that incorporates a lot of the magical principles in initiation into hermetics. The book is basically about a guy who is traumatized, but he has the power to levitate. And he performs at increasingly larger and larger venues until his performances attract nefarious enemies and intelligence agencies recruit him to work for them. So that's kind of what I've really been promoting on podcasts mainly is the book, but I'm happy more to talk about whatever you would like to talk about.
I have some questions about Panic Magic, as that's going to be a big focus of this interview. Without spoiling too much about Panic Magic, you've already discussed a little bit about it, but can you tell our listeners more about it?
Sure. It's about a guy that is about 47 years old, and he's traumatized by sexual childhood abuse, and he's kind of a tormented guy, but he met somebody in Eastern Europe, in Budapest, Hungary, that initiated him into magical abilities, but he didn't get the lower abilities, but he was able to eventually levitate by downloading magnetic fluid into his body, and the magnetic fluid offsets the weight of gravity. So it becomes more than gravity, and he levitates that way, and he retained that ability without getting some of the beginning abilities. But anyways, he performs at a theater, and he makes some money to live off of, but he gets a talent agent eventually, and the talent agent basically gets him larger and larger venues, and he's still tormented, and he slips into this frequent surrealist visions, and he goes into these surrealist visions, and his surrealism is based on the founder of the surrealistic movement, a Frenchman in France around the 1920s. And so he kind of slips into these surrealist visions a whole lot. He undergoes a lot of magical attacks from people. So he kind of engages in magical attacks from people but he's not good at attacking back. So he often gets, almost always gets defeated in these magical attacks, and sometimes they become life-threatening, and he even has to go into the hospital. Now, the book is also a bit of a love story too, so there's relationships involved. It not only involves the aspect of his ascent to more money in being recruited to intelligence agencies, but it also involves a love story about a woman that lives in the duplex underneath him. So it's a very kind of, it's character driven as well as plot driven. You could almost call it an urban fantasy or magical realism, and it's available on Amazon. And all you have to do is search Panic Magic, Clint Sabom, and it will come up. I mean, I hope there's a link under the podcast too, but anyways, that's a little bit more about the book. And it is also currently in the process of becoming an audio book on Audible. Right now, it's available in paperback or ebook on Kindle. And so basically, that's what's available in the short run, but ultimately, it's also going to become an audiobook. We've got it's published by Star Wars Publishing. It's not a self-published book. It's published by Star Wars Publishing, who publishes magical fiction. So, yeah, this is kind of magical realism. It's kind of probably more classified as urban fantasy just because there's so many supernatural elements to the book. And it's a thriller also, it kind of keeps you wondering what's going to happen next.
Was the main character in Panic Magic, was Troy Abraham based on your life story, or were there some other influences as well?
Oh, there were a lot of other influences. I mean, it's definitely a fiction book. I'll be transparent. I certainly don't have the ability to levitate, but I do believe it's possible. Excuse me, I think there's probably I know there are Buddhist and Taoist monks and hermits living in the Himalayas that have the power to levitate, but I personally cannot levitate, so that's not true. And the other characters are pretty much fiction. But to answer your question, it is written in the first person, and I was in the beginning of the book starting it almost as if it was myself. But in the process of writing the book, it kind of became someone else, that wasn't me. It was a very kind of organic process. I mean, obviously it's easier writing in the first person to imagine yourself as that person, but it is certainly a kind of process that I imagined myself as Troy Abraham and imagined things happening. So, yeah, it's influenced by people I've met. It's influenced by some of my own trauma as well. It's influenced on fiction books that I've written. It's influenced a whole lot by the surrealist movement in France. So, yeah, to answer your question, there's a whole lot of other influences, but I kind of had to imagine myself as the person while I was writing it. I had to imagine myself as Troy Abraham.
You've also written the book Preparations for Great Light, which I believe is a nonfiction book of some kind. Without spoiling too much about that book, what is it about?
That is about uh 6 months I spent living in a silent monastery when I was around 30 years old. And so that book is about the process of me living at the monastery. And obviously I kind of changed names to protect anonymity of other people, but it's really about my own spiritual process of what a silent monastery and silent monastic life is about, and me going into that and some of the transformations that occurred in me while living there.
From start to finish, how long did it take you to write each of your books?
From start to finish, it probably took 4 months, they were written pretty quick. It really kind of comes down to juggling life stuff, work stuff, and time to write. And I wrote both books when I had more time to write. That's kind of the biggest challenge of writing is finding the time to write when life includes all these other things.
You mentioned that Panic Magic is traditionally published. Was Preparations for Great Light traditionally published as well, or was that independently or hybrid published?
No, no, that was Panic Magic is traditionally published. Preparation for Great Light was self-published. I probably self-published Preparation for Great Light because I just didn't have the patience to contact publishers and agents. But in Panic Magic, I kind of held out for my goal was to hold out for a publisher, and I got one. So I independently published Preparation for Great Light, and at the time when I published that was, oh gosh, it seems like lifetimes ago. That was I think that was about 10 years ago, but at that time I was working for an organization called Contemplative Light that was pretty much about Christian mysticism. Now, so that's Preparation for Great Light, but Panic Magic is not Christian mysticism. Panic Magic is kind of magical mysticism.
How did your interest in magic and the occult come about?
It came about when I saw referenced in a book on Tarot, the Tarot deck, and I saw Franz Barton referenced in that. And the references, the parts of the book that put the references to him down sounded so interesting that I bought Franz Barton's book, Initiation into Hermetics. Now, he also has other books. He has three in the series, and the second one's The Practice of Magical Evocation, and the third one is The Key to the True Kabbalah. But I focus mainly on the first one because I feel like the first one's enough. Some people, some advanced practitioners of Franz Barton who are my friends, they go on to the other books as well. but I certainly didn't see a need for them. That first book, Initiation into Hermetics, is a lifetime process. So I kind of got interested that way. And sometimes, Franz Barton himself, interestingly enough, he was a devout Catholic. Now, his books are not about Catholicism in any way. And there's actually, let me rephrase that. He may have been a devout Catholic. There's a whole lot we don't know about Franz Barton's life. There's accounts of him being taken by the Nazis. He lived kind of in the mid 20th century, and there's accounts of him being taken by the Nazis and knocking out Nazi practitioners with Kabbalistic formulas, but a lot of his own biography is mixed up. So, anyways, I'm not really concerned about his biography. I'm just kind of concerned about the first book he wrote.
In 2003, you received a Gilman Scholarship to study literature in Hungary. And I'm asking this question because your character in Panic Magic spent part of his time in Hungary, and you studied literature in Hungary in real life. What was it like to study literature in Hungary?
Oh, it was fantastic. It was some of the best times of my life. In general, it was so refreshing to be out of the USA and in a different country. And at the time, Budapest was the capital of Hungary, was very cheap for American dollars. So the scholarship money went a long way at that time. Now I imagine a whole lot's changed since then, but that was such a great experience for me. And it wasn't so much the classes, although I did make some friends there. It was really just about being in another country and exploring the culture there. I made a visit to Prague, where at the time a lot of expatriates and expats, from America were living in Prague. I even went to a Halloween party with expats in Prague. That was very interesting.
One final question. You wrote an academic research paper on surrealism, and that's something you've discussed several times in this interview previously, but your paper won Best Paper at the Conference of the Americas. What was it like to write an award winning research paper?
Well, it was good, but it was kind of simple, you know. I kind of wrote the book while I was in school, and I think the faculty chose me to present the paper at uh, yeah, I wrote the paper in school, and the faculty asked me to present the paper because they always sent one student every year. And I read it and presented it at the conference, and I didn't necessarily expect to win because no one from my school had won before. So the fact that I won was a relief. Now, some people some people don't necessarily seem to think it's all that big of a deal, but for me it was a relief winning. I got a little bit of prize money, not tons, but it was kind of a surprising pleasure.
Clint, you were a fascinating guest to interview, and I thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. And after the recording, let's talk a little bit. But many thanks to you for having me.
Clint was a wonderful guest to interview. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.